Hello, everyone, and hello to our Columbia community. Welcome to Advancing Women, Mentorship, Coaching, and Career Success, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Margaret Flynn Robison, Columbia College class of 1990. I am President Emerita of Columbia College Women, the alumni organization of the college, and I'm also a member of the Columbia College Alumni Association Board. The mission of Columbia College Women is to amplify the voice and leadership of women at Columbia College and across the university and foster a dynamic, lifelong community for all of us. I'm delighted to serve as your moderator this evening alongside these amazing women. In celebration of Women's History Month, tonight's conversation is going to center on the power of women mentoring and supporting one another across their careers and life stages. And our panelists will share insights from their own journeys on reflecting on the growth they've had, confidence they use to be successful, and connections with others. This discussion will offer perspective on how mentorship and coaching can shape a career and open doors. And we hope you all gain insight and a sense of what's possible when we invest in each other. Without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Mariam Hassan, Columbia College 2020, is a go-to market strategist for the artificial intelligence platform Laurel, where she drives enterprise growth by translating revenue leakage into scalable opportunities via time intelligence. She has a background in strategy consulting at Deloitte, and she brings deep knowledge of growth strategy, market intelligence, financial modeling, and cross-functional execution. She aligns sales, product, and operations across measurable commercial outcomes. At Laurel, Hassan focuses on strategic account development, pipeline expansion, and enterprise engagement, and she leverages data-driven insights and executive-level communication to accelerate revenue impact. Her work sits at the intersection of marketing positioning, client transformation, and long-term value creation. All sorts of good buzzwords there, Brian. She earned a master's in global affairs from Rice University. She is a committed mentor and community builder. I can say that from personal experience of seeing her mentor so many people. She serves on the Columbia Alumni Association Board of Directors, and she co-founded the Columbia Arab Alumni Association, actively developing the next generation of leaders. Thank you for joining us, Mariam. Also joining us is Nancy Pack, Columbia College class of 1990, so my classmate, and business school class of 1995. Nancy's an expert in the consumer packaged goods space. She led iconic brands with global companies, including Colgate-Palmolive and Mondelez International. She is a board chair for Daily Crunch Snacks, which is a high-growth, sustainably sprouted nut snack company. Previously, she served as CEO of Tate's Bake Shop, which many of you know about, CEO of Walden Local Meat, and president of North American Ventures for Mondelez International, as well as VP and General Manager of Tom's of Maine. She is the current president of Columbia College Women, and we are thrilled to have you with us, Nancy. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Julie Yuffie, CC98, has been building brands and delivering innovations and scaling businesses in the beauty and beverages industries for more than 2 decades. With a passion for creating standout moments in culture, she has a proven track record for translating consumer insights into meaningful growth. A creative instigator, Yuffie has reignited growth across storied trademarks in her roles as Chief Marketing Officer and General Manager and SVP Marketing at Diageo, AB InBev, and Unilever. She loves design and pop culture and believes iconic brands have the power to change the world. Yuffie was a first mover fellow at the Aspen Institute, an Institute for Real Growth 100 CMO, and AI CMO in residence for A-Team, and a general board member. She's a general board member of Columbia College Women. We're lucky to have her. She earned her bachelor's in history and art history and also earned her master's from Yale. Thank you for joining us, Julie. I'm thrilled we have people from the class of 1988 all the way to the class of 2028 with us tonight. So we're covering 40 years of women at Columbia. Thank you guys so much for joining us. But with that, I wanted to get started, and I'm going to do a little icebreaker that hopefully the group here will give us a little insight into their personality. So I wanted to just say, what was your favorite restaurant at Columbia when you were there? And I'll start with mine because I know that it was, Hopefully I'm not gonna steal it from anyone, but mine is gonna have to be Tom's. It's not very sophisticated, but going there, late night for some French fries and a strawberry milkshake is kind of my iconic memory of Colombia. My palate was not very sophisticated at the time, as you can see. But Julie, I don't know if you want to share yours with us.
Well, mine was, and it might be popular in this group, was Cafe Pertuti. And I have a great memory from there. It doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. It was this Italian restaurant on Broadway, and I think it was like 113th or 14th. And one of my best friends to this very day would eat as many meals as humanly possible there. So if you ever wanted to get together with her, you knew she'd be like, "How about?" As if you had never thought of the restaurant before. So I have only good memories of that restaurant.
Love it, love it. Miriam, do you want to share
Oh
yours?
yeah, Milano's hands down. Age 17 with extra spicy peppers. I'm good. Either that or the halal cart on 115th Street, which when I was there was actually a metal tin with styrofoam containers. Now there are three of those carts as actual trucks, and the price has doubled in the last since I graduated.
That's great. Thank you. What about you, Nancy?
It is still there to this day, so I'm thrilled that it is. V&T's Pizza. It's a great place, wood fire oven pizzas. It's great for gatherings. It was possibly a place or two for a date here and there, but it's just a great, informal, delicious, affordable, I think, at the time. And I remember warm memories of V&T's, and it's still there today. And I'm looking forward to going when I get to New York in April.
And I remember that being the fancy pizza place, right? As opposed
Versus
to
Coronet.
versus Coronet, right? Well, great. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Well, tonight in New York, we have people from all over the place, so really appreciate it. To start us off, I thought I'd have you share a moment in your career when mentorship or coaching made a meaningful difference for you, and what shifted as a result of that. And so I'm going to kind of reverse the order if that's okay. And Nancy, if you don't mind, I'll start with you, and then we'll just
Sure,
have everyone
absolutely.
participate.
Thank you. So early in career, I'd worked at Colgate-Palmolive. I was in the marketing team, and there was a gentleman, I won't say his name, he's still a dear friend today, but he was general manager for one of the big departments. And he was just very funny. He was very approachable, and he loved candy. And he was looking for people that would have candy that he could steal, sit, he would talk to you. And I was in his team, and I was very, very early in career marketing assistant. And, I was lucky that he would invite me to different meetings, advertising meetings, meetings with the board, probably places or occasions that a person early in career may not be invited to, but he invited me to everything. And I really appreciated that and didn't realize the impact that would have later on later on in life. But one of the things that he kept saying is, it's great that, you love our team. It's great that, you have friendships here. You really need to meet people outside of our group, outside of our floor, outside of marketing. And he kept repeating it. And I remember after being in his group, moved on and had, connection with him. And he said, if you want to go and have an international career and have some international experiences, you need to meet people that are running some of these other regions of the world. I will introduce you if you'd like, but you really need to get, broaden your network and start talking to people about your career aspirations. And I thought, wow, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to meet new people. And I'm an extreme extrovert, so I didn't have a problem meeting new people, but just this idea of get out of the group that you know and speak up and share what you'd like to do. So I thought it was great advice. He's still a great friend and mentor in everything life, but I thought that was a really interesting, pivotal moment that I've shared that advice to folks who have asked me to mentor them.
And we know sort of the result of that because you spent so much of your career in some
I did.
amazing places. So
I
you
did. I was
you
lucky.
obviously you caught on quickly. Well, thank you, Nancy, for
Thank you.
sharing that. Julie, why don't you go next?
So the the mentor who sticks out for me from my earliest time in my career was a mentor who left me with something that I don't know that they actually even intended to leave. And is, like Nancy's, still a good friend and mentor to me to this day. But she was my boss in one of my roles as a brand manager at Unilever. And I remember just the way that she worked and the relationship she built around her were unlike those of others around. And, for those who know me, I have a very distinctive personality, and some people love it. I'm an extreme extrovert like Nancy, and other people, it might be challenging for them. And I remember looking at her and realizing that like she was able to succeed and be herself despite the environment that she was operating in, right? She didn't feel the need to like just be like everyone else. And it's very, I think, challenging, and it's very difficult to have the confidence to sometimes go against the grain and be genuinely yourself. But she left me with that kind of image of leadership. Fast forward to later in my career, I had more seasoned, further along, and I would be getting advice like, well, this is the culture of where we are, and this is what happens, and blah, 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 from individuals who had been much more senior to me in organizations. And I reflected back on this mentor of mine. And I was like, I appreciate that advice that they are telling me. However, I got myself here for a reason. And the things that make me strong, they might be my weakness, but like, I genuinely don't want to lose that. How can I be more like this mentor that I had in the back of my mind? And to this day, I have passed that feedback along to others, just because there is a way to go, right? The prevailing wind doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like the prevailing to succeed in an organization. And it's something I think I care a lot about for myself. It's something I really appreciate in others. And it was purely because this individual made such a difference in my life, because she was a leader unlike others in these organizations that I had looked up to. So for whatever it's worth, to this day, I always try to keep a bit of like, you don't have to be like everybody else to succeed amongst everybody else.
I think that's great. Yeah, no, and I think I feel like I hope we're making progress in that regard. I know, I do feel like when some of us started our careers, it was really about imitating the guys and wearing the suits, and, and now I feel like the world has changed a lot, and, the guys are asking for time to pick up their kids from school. And I mean, that's just an extreme, but, just, you don't have to pretend like you don't have children, or you don't have, which not necessarily what you were talking about when you talked about being genuine, but I think that is a part of being genuine. So I think hopefully bringing our whole selves, both as women, as whatever our backgrounds are and our experiences are, to our jobs, how do we find the environment where we can do that? I think that's something that maybe we can elaborate on as we go forward. And Miriam, I think love to hand it to you, because I think that's something you were talking about when we got prepped to this, or we talked about showing up authentically was something you spoke about specifically. So
I feel very strongly about showing up authentically. And Julie, I love that you said that. I'm actually, one of the rings that I'm wearing today says in Arabic, which is part of me showing up authentically, what makes you different makes you beautiful. And I think that the more we can embrace that as women in industry, and women who are super ambitious in every aspect of our lives, that's really, really important, because when you try to shove one part of yourself down or make yourself more similar to those around you, I think you lose what truly makes you unique. And that feels very on the nose, very punny, but those things that make you unique are what are going to make you successful. And every time I talk to a student who asks for guidance or is looking for help, I'm like, just show up as you are, put your best foot forward, stop trying to hide who you are, stop trying to fit in with stop it. Go show up, do your thing, and people will take notice, and you'll be successful for it.
So I want to let you answer the other question, not to, I put you on the spot on that one, but is there a specific moment about mentorship that you want to highlight, or, yeah.
You know,
We can talk about some things in general as well, because I know you have some thoughts there.
I've been very lucky with the mentors that I've had, and I can't necessarily pinpoint a single moment that's been pivotal in my career because my career is still pretty young. But I can look at a variety of moments, and I can look at very specific people in those same moments. And there's a pattern of these mentors that have shown up for me time and time again, from when I was a senior in college to when I was picking graduate school to when I was deciding if I should stay in Texas versus come back to New York versus leaving Deloitte to come to my new job. They're kind of the same set of individuals that have actively checked in and taken an interest in not just my professional well-being, but my personal well-being and my personal growth in those experiences. And they've truly made a substantial difference in helping me grow as a person, because you are a person that has multiple layers. We're all multidimensional. And I'm very grateful to have had those mentors invest in multiple parts of who I am.
I think that's great. Yeah. I'm going to get you to shift just to keep you on the hot seat for a minute. But we were talking a little bit about mentorship and coaching, and sometimes they're used interchangeably. How would you distinguish between the two? Is there one that's been more valuable? Maybe talk a little bit about your thoughts around that.
So I think people conflate these two, and they're certainly an interchangeable nature to them. I've coached as an athletics coach. I've coached in terms of just people who are looking for help. And then I've been coached and been mentored and done all of these things on the receiving end. But I think coaching has a set goal that you're trying to achieve. I think it's a little bit more finite and goal oriented, whereas mentorship, I feel, transcends a specific goal orientation and is more an investment of how do I grow over time? How do I develop as a person? How do I make decisions in a moment without letting too many other factors come into play? And perhaps looking at coaching as being goal oriented is just my athletics hat. But I do feel that there have been moments where I've gone to mentors for coaching of how do I proceed in this moment? Where do I go next? What do I do? Versus mentorship, which has been, how are you? Which is always, I don't think there's any wrong or right way to go about either. And a coach can be a mentor and a mentor can be a coach. And I think everybody deserves both. And they can be different people.
Mm-hmm. Or sometimes the same people. Yeah.
Or the same people. There's no wrong way.
Sometimes the same person can do both. Nancy or Julie, did you want to jump in on that?
I mean,
I'd love to. Oh, go ahead.
No, okay. Well, we'll go in reverse, I guess, this time. No, I mean, for me, whenever I've had coaching experiences, it's usually been, I looked for an individual, specifically similar to what Miriam's saying, but, they were assigned as a coach. We had like a regular cadence of behavior and interaction. And my piece of advice, for whatever it's worth on this, is not all coaches are obviously the same. It may seem obvious, but just in case. And I found actually that I had better coaching experiences with individuals who maybe knew less about my personal dynamics, the things going around me, the work environment that I was in, than some of the folks who were like deeply entrenched in it, just because they could be more impartial. Or maybe they had a different, personality. And so the prevailing culture of the organization that I was operating in or what have you wouldn't kind of impact them in the same way as it did individuals within. Whereas I seem to have found, again, this is my personal experience, most of my mentors came from work experiences. I worked with them. They saw me for what I could do. I learned from them. I looked up to them, et cetera, et cetera. So I would almost liken it to the mentor was much more of a closer in-work, long-term relationship, whereas my coaches have always been, a deep respect. Some of these engagements went on for quite a long time, like years, and they gave me invaluable coaching and guidance, but they were maybe more removed from my actual life, which enabled them to be good at what they were doing, if that helps anyone.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting. Nancy, you were going to talk about some things.
Yeah, I was going to add to what both Miriam and Julie said, which is when I think about mentors, mentorship is a two-way. I think of it as a relationship, but it's two-way relationships. And I think that mentors who, you develop relationships over time. It could be in work, it could be where you volunteer or in your community, it could be family or friends. Um, but it is, I think, most effective and, very fulfilling when you can seek guidance, ideas, inspiration, and soundboard with a mentor and also provide feedback or provide them with advice or your perspective. And so it's sort of a mutual sort of circle or cycle. And I think it's a relationship that often lasts for a very long time. It's a safe space. Your mentor might give you some tough feedback if you ask for it, but generally it is, it's a safe space to maybe let your hair down and you're having a tough moment in your life for your career and you can just say it and they'll, there is that kind of often warmth around you. And then they'll say, okay, so now here's some ways you can think about something. I think coaching, to what's been said, a little bit more formal, often can have a structured timeline, can last beyond a formal program, generally more objective, and trying to get you from, where you are to maybe it's another role in your company, maybe it's going from where you are thinking about doing something completely different. But it tends to be a little bit more formal and structured, and you're moving from one step to another. And mentors are just, they're there for life in many, many cases. And I've been fortunate to have that.
Margaret,
That's
mind if I
fantastic.
jump in with something here?
No,
Just
please do.
Nancy said
Please
something that I
do.
feel is so important and I don't want to forget it. You talk about how mentorship is a two-way street. And it never ceases to amaze me when a student or someone who's just starting their professional careers says, I hate networking. It feels so transactional. All this, like I just feel like I'm going to talk to people to get a job. Like, you're networking wrong, because mentorship, like you said, is a two-way street. And Nancy, I love the experience of you and I, in that I've come to you for career advice time and time again, and you've come to me for advice on other things. And what a lot of young professionals, I think, forget is that they have a zone of genius and they have a set of skills and knowledge base that mentors who might be more tenured in their careers, while they are exceptional in their roles and their work, might not have that same experience. Right? AI, I think, is a really good example, because even though I work for an AI company, I'm still learning AI. And my brother, who's only a few years younger than me, is teaching me AI. And I'm learning it every day at work. But there's this back and forth, up and down, left and right dynamic to mentorship that I think is so incredibly important that we can't ignore it. And so the next time a student comes to you and says, oh, I don't have anything, wrong. You have so much to offer when you look up, because they're also looking to you for guidance. It's not up and down, it's left and right.
Love
So,
that.
so just to keep you talking for a second on that, Miriam, there's a couple different people. We've got Rachel, Columbia College, class of 28, Catherine, law school, class of 21, Linda, social work, class of 2009, all kind of asking this big question that I think we all have. It's like, this all sounds good, but how do I find these people? How do I get these mentors? What do I have to do to maintain this network? And I think you touched on it by saying, it's really about creating relationships for the sake of creating relationships, not for the sake of mentoring, right? So maybe you can all expand on that and talk about some ways that you think you've been successful that might be helpful to the people listening in tonight.
I mean, Julie said it earlier, and I'm just going to reiterate it: when you show up authentically and show up uniquely as yourself, in terms of how to build mentor relationships, I do feel very strongly that the most successful mentoring relationships that I've had, at least in my experience, have been the ones that have grown off of organic connection. I wasn't necessarily looking for job opportunities or network or whatever. I just wanted to meet people and understand their stories. And that was how I started to build my network. And those are still phenomenal people in my life. And I reach out for the sake of reaching out, because at the end of the day, all any of us really wants as humans is more human connection. I think that's how you build and sustain a far more lucrative is not the right word, but sustainable network of mentors, because you need more than one mentor.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding trite in this, I fully agree. Poor Nancy's going to get her inbox flooded, because just as an example, she is a mentor to me. She may not know this yet. But it was almost surprising. Like I joined CCW and, you know, lo and behold, we've had like remarkably common careers. We know lots of people in common. We're, you know, like in different organizations, different types of things, but there are things that bring people together naturally, right? To Miriam's point about human connection. And the same happens in workplaces, the same happens in volunteering. And, you know, your friends become your mentors too, right? And particularly as I've gone through my career, I've been very lucky to, in my most recent experiences, work with peers who became my friends. And they are mentors, right? Everyone has different personalities. They see the things in different ways. They have different backgrounds and experiences. And, you know, I look at that like I do any friendship where it's a gift, good feedback, bad feedback. It's a gift to get it, receive it, and nurture that. And so, you know, you find anywhere where you are the opportunity. I think it needs to come from something that you have in common with someone, you know, being open to hearing their perspective and being open to sharing yours, since we've established it's a two-way street.
Yeah. Julie, you're making me turn turn
You're
red.
so good.
I
You're so
appreciate
good.
it. No, you're really kind. I would add to say, you know, I think that you know, there's kind of a question that's been, you know, emerging about, well, how do you find mentors, or how, you know, how might you approach it? And I will say, I think we all make it harder than it actually is. And I say that after you know, many years of life and work. But I think it's often when you ask someone to be a mentor, and it doesn't have to be very formal, like, will you mentor me for 2 years, you know, on Tuesdays from, you know, 4 to 5 p.m. Like sometimes it is set up and there's some, you know, there's some calendar to it, or there's some cadence to it. But I find that, and I was given this advice, I find that when you approach someone that you respect, that you've worked with, you are in a, you know, in a volunteer organization, or you're on a team together, or you're working together professionally, if when you approach someone and say, you're someone that I trust, I really respect, I appreciate the work that you're doing, I think you're a great leader, I would love to learn more from you. Would you consider, you know, being a mentor, or serving as a mentor for a period of time? I really would love to follow XYZ in your career path, or I find the work that you do outside of, you know, professionally so fascinating. You have you know, a nonprofit organization that you started. I'd love to learn more from you. And generally, when you ask that, many people, I won't say everybody, they're flattered. They're like, wow. And this has happened when people have asked me for advice, or, you know, can we spend some time together? I'm like, ooh, this is so flattering. You feel, you know, appreciated, and you feel like, wow, I want to, you know, provide advice or perspective, or just spend time with someone new. And I think, and I had this, you know, early in career, I found it really hard. I'm like, oh, you know, she's really senior, and she doesn't have time on her calendar, and she doesn't know who I am. And you just go through this whole cycle of, it's too hard, and people are going to be annoyed or not interested. And I really think the opposite is true in many cases. If you just, you know, you're yourself, you approach with interest and appreciation, and you want to learn. Uh, a lot of folks have been really generous with their time, and their, you know, their spending time with you. And I think it's just getting over the, ooh, people don't want to be bothered, more that, wow, people appreciate being engaged. So it's that first or second time you approach someone might feel a little uncomfortable, but we're making it harder than I think it actually is in
Can
many
I
cases.
build on what you're saying,
Yeah.
Nancy? Because I think that when you were speaking, I realized I've never actually formally asked anyone ever in my 20-something years of marketing to be my mentor. And they may not even know sometimes that they are like that woman I referenced earlier, right? May not even know, but we talk all the time. We have input. She gives me advice and feedback. So, you know, I think you can approach it. There's no one size fits all way to do this. Like she became my mentor because I saw in her leadership style something I really held in high regard. And I didn't even realize she was really my mentor till I had left that organization, gone to another one, and was disseminating advice, thinking of like, well, what would she do? Right, to other people. So I do think that, you know, these relationships kind of can form in different ways, and there isn't a one size fits all approach. I think you have to figure out what is good for you. And the other piece I'll say to Nancy's point about getting over the initial jitters, if you are going to be formal about it, a lot of organizations like the ones I've been part of, which are large public companies, as you grow in your career, one, you move further away sometimes from the work that like you really love that got you there in the first place. And your focus becomes much more about the people and the leading. And this is one way that you can do that. So don't be afraid that someone's not going to want to do it, because actually it becomes more part of their remit than you would think. And two, it helps them get to do what they love to do. Like I worked for someone who was a CEO once, and he was like, oh my goodness, I would love to get into this marketing campaign. And he's like, let me direct the thing. And can I see the agencies and what they're bringing? And it was like, okay, he just wants to have his time rolling around in the work of marketing. The brand manager. Great. You know, I'll welcome it. That's fine. But he missed it. He genuinely missed it. So, you know, there's not one size fits all. You don't necessarily have to be formal about it. But if you do want to be formal, know that you're probably not asking for more than these people are being charged with anyway, if that, to whatever extent that is helpful.
I think that's fantastic. And I think it, you know, one of the things that I think Nancy does extremely well, and that what you were just saying made me think about, is creating space for things to happen, right? Nancy, you know, makes the time to talk to people and to create space. And I think that that's important for everyone to have in the back of their mind. Don't go into the conversation thinking, oh, I'm trying to get this mentoring out of this, right? Just go into the conversation curious about what that person does, or what their family is like, or other things, right? And I'd love to talk a little bit about sort of non-work related networking that leads to mentorship. I mean, I'm thinking recently, as the people on the panel know, I have a young child, and so I spend a lot of time at children's birthday parties. And I go to these birthday parties, and I notice the dads are always standing around talking about their jobs with each other. And I'm like, why am I not talking about and most of them tend to be in finance, which I'm also in, but I'm not spending time talking to them. It's just not natural for me to be at a party and talk about my job. And I'm trying to do that because I do think it creates opportunities, and you meet people, and people see you in a different light. And there's some fascinating people. And I know one of the women that is a fellow mom of in this group of mine, she has her own business. She works in a co-working space. And a lot of the dads also work at that co-working space. And she, you know, just the other day, one of the dads, I guess he doesn't have as good of a screen where he's set up, and she's like, I'm not going to be there all day, so you can use my screen. And, you know, it creates a dynamic between them. So that brings me to, so it's sort of, how do we do networking in more, or find mentors in a less formal environment? And then also, how do we give a little to get something back? So that's her example. You know, she's giving access to things, and in the future, I'm sure that's going to come back to her threefold in other ways. But anyway, I don't have thoughts about that from you. Nancy, maybe you want to start off. I don't know if you have any thoughts in the regard of sort of the more informal places to find mentors.
Yeah, I think that you know, and this gets to also being outside of like your everyday, again, whether it's your own business or it's a professional organization, or, you know, whatever profession or wherever you're spending your time. I think getting outside of that and going to, you know, events, can be on your own. It could be maybe with someone that, you know, that you're friends with. I think going to events that with a topic of interest, and I'll do a plug, Columbia College and Columbia College Women, we have many people that come to these events. You know, there is organic networking. You might see a classmate, there's some presentation, or there's a discussion, and then there's generally some session after, just folks networking, and you meet somebody, you just feel there's a click. Oh, didn't realize we know someone in common. And what I'm seeing more, and I love seeing this, I don't think I saw this earlier in life, is oh, can we exchange, what's your LinkedIn? Can we connect? I'd love to learn more from you or hear more about your business. And it's just that, when you can make a little bit of time to go to some of these events of something that you're interested in, professional or otherwise, I just think those are the places it's just natural. Everyone's kind of talking to other folks. And then it feels really comfortable to follow up. Like, I'd love to connect. I have a young child too. I'd love to hear, how where you spend time with your kids. And I'm seeing those connections. I've certainly had folks reach out after an event to me, and I've reached out to many people at these events just because I'm fascinated. And I think when you can go to things that are not so formal or so, professionally oriented, you make, friends and new connections easier than if you think about like, oh, it has to be at work or it needs to be somebody that that's in my company or something like that. So I just love going to different panel events, conferences. I just went to Expo West in California. There are 100,000 people that walk through there. It's a naturals conference. I probably came back with 65 new LinkedIn connects, and I'm going to follow up with a lot of them. They're fascinating people, great businesses, early stage growth businesses. I want to learn more from these founders, and I plan to definitely, connect or follow up if I've been reached into. So.
And I would actually add to the like non-work related stuff. I've had really fascinating conversations with people like weddings and blah, blah, blah. Like, think of the non-work events that you go to in the course of life. And you randomly are seated next to someone at a table and you're having a chit chat. How do you know this person? Yada, yada, yada. And then lo and behold, I found myself on conference calls and Zooms hearing about, like we did something tangential to what I was interested in learning about. And, you end up in a connection. Like in some of the current advisory work I do, it's because someone was like, oh, you should talk to this guy. I was like, this person doesn't know what I do. I showed up in an office. These people, like, I was like, they're like, do you know why you're here? I'm like, nope, no idea why I'm here. We just got to talking and, found our way. So there's certainly, it's all out there. Just the more you have to be comfortable talking, I think, and reaching out and being curious.
So just to touch on that, and Miriam, if you wanted to, you can always segue as a part of this, but confidence. Some of the questions are around, how do you have the confidence to do that? It doesn't come naturally. Do you have to be an extrovert to be good at finding mentors, right? And so, what helps you build confidence? And I know, Miriam, you've talked about being visible and how important that is. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think confidence looks different for everybody, right? Success looks different for everybody, as does confidence. I mean, Julie and Nancy are extreme extroverts, I think is what you both said. I'm actually an ambivert, contrary to what most people think about me. So as much as I love time with other people, time by myself is really, really valuable. Now, if you're an introvert, the very concept of walking up to a stranger and trying to have a conversation for 10 seconds about the weather can be just daunting. But what I'd say is you have something to offer that conversation, whether you choose to realize it or not. You have a zone of genius that somebody else can learn an exponential amount from in just 60 seconds if you give yourself the opportunity to be seen. You can't play the game if you never step onto the pitch. You have to put yourself in the arena and give somebody an opportunity to see how much value you have to add and believe that you have value to add. Because once you realize that you have a unique skill set and a unique set of experiences that you can bring to a conversation, that you can bring to a room, and somebody else in that room has the exact same thing, but of different, they have completely different skill sets, completely different unique experiences. That's where the magic happens, is allowing yourself to put yourself on the pitch and say, yeah, I've got one or two interesting stories, even if it's just one or two interesting stories. That goes a long way to building a relationship. And not every relationship is going to be perfect, but you have to at least own internally that you have something interesting to offer. And that can be really hard. You just have to take at bats.
I'm going to add.
Yeah, and then I'm going to add after you, Julie.
I think so. One, I will say this also changes over time, right? So Miriam's more at the beginning of her career. Some of us are a little bit older, though we look just the same.
Yeah, we do.
And this definitely changes over time. And there's, of course, the millions and millions of studies, right, that women, we're amongst Columbia College women tend to want or feel the need to be like experts and have mastered everything before they go out. And other individuals don't necessarily feel like they need that entree point before they go out and start talking to people. So given this information, I'm going to quote what someone once told me in a previous company. He was the CEO of the business at the time where I was. And she had been a consultant at one of the big consulting firms. And she was actually mentoring someone who was an introvert and had a really challenging time, raising her voice for various reasons. So the thing, and I repeat the story often because I thought it was really fascinating. She's like, put yourself in situations that are, no risk, where you can practice this. At the time, again, this is a long time ago, it was a different time in New York. She was like, put yourself in like a taxi where you need to speak really, really loud because there's traffic and noise, and practice like coming into the taxi being like, I need to go to this place, like something that would be very out of, this was her feedback. But like, I thought the notion of putting yourself into situations that are low risk, where you can practice using a voice that maybe you're not as comfortable using, so that when you go into those situations where you want to be more extroverted or you want to try something new, you will feel like, hey, I've done this before. I thought was a really interesting strategy, is point one. Then if in doubt, go find your crazy hyper extroverts like me and Nancy, right? We will always talk to anyone. Like I will talk to a doorknob and I love it. And I learn so much. And I think that, that's why I have a lot of introvert friends. They're not introverted with me, but that's not where they necessarily would start. They get their energy in their mind, in their quiet time, and thinking with others, whereas I get it from interacting and creating with other people. So like, there are people out there who want to engage with you, and find those situations that you can make it easier for yourself if you're not naturally inclined to go up and chat with someone and just ask them questions about their lives.
All right, I'm going to add one. This is a tip and trick that I think works no matter what part of your career or stage of, life you are. And I've used it for folks that have asked me to, and I've actually asked a few people to do this. So it is wing person. So imagine that you're going to a wedding, you don't know anybody. It's, you're going as a friend of a friend, and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to go to this thing. I don't know anyone. I'm going as a last minute guest, and I'm not really up for it. And so, and this happened with a friend, and she said, I really don't want to go. And I said, I know you don't want to go, you're going. And she said, can you introduce me to 4 people? Like, we're going to walk around, introduce me to 4 people, just say something about how we know each other, and then drop me off. And then I'm going to come find you a little later, second person, third person, fourth person, and then I'll be fine. I was like, oh, okay. And over time, she didn't need wing people, but for a couple of different social situations, she's like, I don't want to go to this. And the wing person concept works in a social setting, but also is very, very effective. If you're in an organization, it's a big company or big organization, you're early in your career, find a wing person who's going to walk you over to that person you wanted to meet or leader you wanted to meet. There's have you met so and so? She's just joined the team. She moved over from here. She's so excited to be working on this project. And then the person's like, oh, no, I haven't met you. And then you fade away. I can't be abrupt, but it does work. It's connecting other people. You don't have to go up to someone alone, because it can be kind of awkward. But if you go up as, kind of a group or a small 2 or 3 people, intro and fade away, it's just more comfortable. It feels natural. There's less risk or less sense of stress or stress. And I think it works. So just the wing person tip, if you feel like you want to try it, let me know how it works. But it has seemed to work in many cases, social or otherwise.
I always love your tips and tricks, Nancy. They're always good.
Wing person.
Exactly. So I'm going to start to bring in some of the questions from the audience, and um, maybe we'll just have like one person answer each. But before we do that, there have been several questions on career changing and how to how to do that well, and I guess the role that mentorship or coaching can provide in that. So I don't know if one of you feels especially strongly to talk about that. I mean, I'm a career changer myself. I'll briefly just share some experience, which is that for me, when I chose to change careers, the first thing I did is I tried to just distill the skills that made me successful in my previous career to just figure out what those skills and talents were, and then think about what I enjoyed the most as I was trying to find the new career. And then I went out to my network of people that I already had, this sort of personal board of directors, so to speak. And I said, these are the things I'm good at. This is the type of environment I like working in. And what are some thoughts on in your, I was narrowing it down a little bit, but I didn't have an exact field I wanted to be in. So I wanted to find out how those would work in the environment they were in. And one of the important things for me in that process was that I not have to take a huge step back, right, in my career. And so there were several things that I talked to people about, but some of them they were like, you know what, you would have to kind of start from the beginning again to do this. So maybe this isn't the greatest fit for you, because that was something I didn't want to do. I think other people are willing to kind of start all over again. So I don't know, Julie, if do you want to kind of take a first crack at that around career change? I know you maybe haven't necessarily done that, but I think you've worked with a lot of different companies and brands, right?
Sure. I mean, so my big career change, right, was between grad school, before grad school, and post. So for me, post grad school, I have functionally, for the most part, done a lot in the same sphere. But that was the first change, I would say, where like in order to to do something different, previous to grad school, I worked in finance. After grad school, I discovered the world of consumer marketing and of course, love at first sight, never going back. But that being said, I have definitely had, as I moved between organizations, had to your point, Margaret, showcase how what I have done before applies or brings something different or brings something additive to wherever I was going next. Sometimes it's easier within an industry where you're like, okay, I can see brand manager, great, no problem. But I was moving between, skincare, hair care, cosmetics to beverage alcohol, I remember having a conversation with a very important CEO who was like, how is this similar? And I had to explain that it wasn't the function. It was like, there's something in the job that I knew that I could bring them that they didn't have, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you're dead on when you have to think about the skills and what you bring to the table that is prepared you for what they're doing, as well as maybe something that's additive that someone within the industry wouldn't have that you can bring that's unique and different. That's the feedback I have, keeping in mind that I've changed categories, but I haven't changed industries in a while.
Nancy or Miriam, either of you, maybe just one of you speak to this.
Miriam, do you want to go?
I mean, mine will be really brief, honestly.
Okay.
Like I switched from management consulting to a go-to-market team. I think if you are thinking about taking a dive into something that's new, do it. You'll learn something. The worst thing that can happen is you'll learn something new about yourself. And I'm very fortunate. It's working out really great for me, but take the shot. You'll learn something and you'll be better for it.
And Margaret, if I can jump in with very quickly, I went from being, growing up in the marketing function or marketing vertical at Colgate, went internationally, as you mentioned. And as I came back, I wanted to run businesses, either a country or a brand or, some business. I loved marketing, but I was really enticed by running a company. So through the networking, through the gentleman that liked candy, all the way to, someone that I worked with when I was in Asia and expressing my interest in running a company, I was able to come back to the US from being abroad and run Tom's of Maine. But it's owned by Colgate Palmolive. The big change was, so a couple changes is going from marketing, expanding to run a company, but it's within one parent company. To the big thing was leaving Colgate, deciding to leave Colgate and Tom's of Maine and go do something else, but be CEO. And I was like, so it was the intersection of networking big time. I realized I have a very small network of, we can talk about toothpaste and toothbrushes all day long, but I didn't know folks outside of that. And I really needed to do a lot of, organic, authentic networking, but I had to get out there. I had an executive coach for a period of time after I left, working on resume, narrative, what do I have to offer, the skill sets that can transfer, what would make me, how could I contribute to another company? So I went from toothpaste to the world of, cookies and crackers. And there were a lot of skill sets and experiences that I could talk about that would, that made it possible or made it appealing for me to join Tate's, and did that. And I've run another company after that in the subscription meat space, completely different. And it was really, as you've all said, what are the skills? What are what's your leadership, style you're going to bring? How are you going to build culture? And I'm not a finance expert. I wasn't a supply chain or, HR expert, but, building the skills, having great people around me, networking, mentoring, and coaching, the intersection of those things helped me to go from a place I'd been for 25 years, like they call, like, wow, she's only been in one place, even though it was different experiences, to, okay, this person is, qualified and can contribute, going to a completely different industry in a role, in a CEO role versus, having grown up in different roles in marketing. So it was big. It was daunting. It was, scary at times. I was like, can I do this? I don't know. I had to ask mentors, like, how can I be successful? Give me feedback, give me advice. But it was a really big pivot in career and industry and, environments, etc.
I'm going to toss
I'm lucky it worked out.
I'm going to toss one more thing in there because you said something really important. I feel like as it's Women's History Month. This is a women's panel. I feel like as women, we have this inherent need to say, "Oh, I'm not qualified. I don't check all the boxes on the thing, so I'm just not going to try." My amalgam for this is WWBD. What would Brad do? Brad is the dude who, on paper, you or I might look at him and be like, I don't know. But Brad is going to submit his resume anyway because Brad knows he can bring some value. Be Brad for a minute. Like, just go submit the resume. Go give it a shot.
I thought maybe it was Brad Pitt, which also could.
No, Brad's just my random dude amalgam.
I love that.
What would Brad
the overconfident guy who might be a little too overconfident.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a salmon. He's got like a salmon shirt and a vest on, like hair slicked back. That's my amalgam. Anyway, that's how I think you need to beat imposter syndrome. Is like, what would Brad do?
So a little bit on that, we have some questions from, sorry to cut you off, Julia, but I think it's adding to this. There are some questions around, maybe women tend to get more unsolicited feedback than male colleagues. How do you sort of respond to that? I think there's some stuff about, are we tougher on each other even? So since it is Women's History Month and this is about women's being successful, I don't want to end on a negative note, but how do we sort of see both sides of that and stay strong and authentic in the face of maybe some more headwinds than some of our other colleagues, and that may be true for various reasons, because we're female, because of other things about our identities. So thoughts on that?
So a couple things, I'll just jump in because it actually relates very well to what Miriam was saying. to her point on, everyone has their genius inside, right? When you are in your position or in a meeting or in a room, right? Physical or virtual, like we are today, you're there for a reason. So if in doubt, like my advice to people is always like, you are there for a reason. You're not there just to be, a wall fixture. Participate, right? And like, I can't stress this enough. Don't participate just for the sake of like, participation, but realize you're there because you're valued. And so shying away means you're not actually contributing your values worth to that setting. And you should not shy away from that. And in the worst case, you say something that someone's like, oh, I don't agree with it, or it's not right, or whatever. What's the worst that's going to happen? But I've always come from the vantage point of, if someone's there, like I want to hear from them, I want to see them, I want to feel their contribution. And I think that particularly women self-criticize, to your point, Margaret, and don't do that. So I always try and put myself in the room, because then once you're there, you need to participate, and it kind of gets you going. I think I forgot now the rest of the question, but I do think that's an important thing for women to realize. Like, when you are there, you're not there to be silent. Oh, the criticism. I think criticism, feedback, I've always thought is a gift, good or bad, right? It doesn't mean you have to take all the feedback exactly, but I certainly think it's worth acknowledging it, even if it's hard. You don't have to like publicly broadcast it to everyone, but you need to think about it yourself. You need to think about why you're getting it, and what you're going to do with it. And sometimes it may be just a function of, to your point, bias, right? Like, there's more feedback, or, why can't Miriam be more like Brad? Like, she's not acting Brad like. Why is she not acting Brad like?
Because Miriam's not Brad.
Right.
Brad's not Miriam.
I have this analogy, right, where companies will, like, I've been in situations where you've come from the outside to a company, and they're like, oh, this is great. We've now got this nice, bright, shiny object, unlike all the other. Like, we've got a cat. Now that cat can complement all the dogs, right? Great. Why is the cat not barking? Why is it meowing? Like, right? So these situations happen in human dynamics. I think you need to take the feedback, good or bad, think about it, and then make a conscious choice of what will you do with it, right? And I think that you might negotiate with your mind. Sometimes it's great feedback, sometimes it's bad. I've certainly made, on occasion, a choice to take feedback unnecessarily, and I've made a choice sometimes to not take feedback that maybe I should have. But I would, recognize that when someone's giving you a comment, they're putting a piece of themselves. At least I always take it from the vantage point of, they're putting a piece of themselves out there, and their point to you, and that's an extension of kind of trust and goodwill. And so I do my best to try and think about it, even if it's hard, not to like break me down, but to think about, what can I take away from this experience that they're giving me this feedback. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a great point. Nancy, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, it does, it certainly matters, or can differ depending on who's giving you the feedback and what it is. But I have had times where, if I'm confused, or if I feel like I'm like, oh, there's something hidden here, I have politely asked and said, thank you for providing your perspective. Help me understand sort of the, what's driving this comment, or what's driving, this observation. I'd really love to understand it so that I can, think about it more deeply. I'm trying to get the person to, I'm not catching them, but I just want to understand what's behind it. Because if they say, I don't know, it's, didn't look like it was your project because, I didn't hear anything from you. I don't know. It could be, oh, well, what's behind that? And it could be that the person thought, I should be presenting the project, but actually there's different people presenting it. Like, what's the context? So if you're comfortable to politely ask, a little bit more and sort of deepen to get the context of the feedback, then you can, to Julie's point, you can park it, you can throw it over your shoulder, or you can say, oh, okay, it wasn't clear that, that I'm behind this project, I definitely want to make sure that, I'm visible or that I'm contributing in the next meeting. It just depends, but I like to know what's behind a comment if it's confusing or may seem like it's critical.
I think that's great. Miriam, anything that you wanted to add in that regard?
I'll be brief. I think feedback, Julie, to your point, is a gift, but you have to decide what you use and what you table because again, feedback is something that that person is reflecting onto you based on a limited scope of experiences that they have with you. Now, that said, feedback is something that you can grow from, but you owe it to yourself to understand who you are, to recognize whether that feedback is a reflection of something that you are, something that you are doing, or something that the person giving you that feedback is projecting onto you. And when you can distinguish between the three, that's where growth lies. Because if that person is just projecting things on you, that's not really helpful. It helps you understand how they operate, helps you understand how to navigate that experience with them and work with them more productively. But if it's about something that you're doing, that's something that you can change. That's something that you can use to make yourself a better member of that team. But if it's about something of who you are, you have to know who you are before you take feedback from somebody about who you are. And especially be careful about taking feedback when someone gives it to you about who you are from someone whose opinion you don't value in that regard. You have to value your opinion of yourself first and foremost. And then that first circle around you, that's your net. Right? That's your personal board of directors. Those are the people that hopefully know you better than most. Those are the people that you can trust with that value of who am I and how am I operating in this world? Then you get the outer rung of the things that you're doing, and then the third rung of feedback that isn't an accurate reflection of yourself. But you have to determine how you value yourself more than anything else.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll say, for me, this is a little bit geeky. My daughter loves to call me nerd. But I think you really need to think about that feedback and say, yes, maybe this is some feedback about something that I could change, or that's something where I have a growth area. But if you know about genetics, the same cell, the same gene that causes sickle cell also makes you immune to malaria. So what I take away from that is, let's just be careful, right? Sometimes I'm a little bit too aggressive maybe, but that's also the thing that makes me be a go-getter and get things out there. So don't throw away the thing that makes you successful because of some of the flip side of it that can be negative. Think about, how do I maybe accommodate for that or be more aware of that, but don't, just be thoughtful about, maybe there's something about this feedback that is actually a positive for me and that is reflecting something that's a strength I have. I'm just not expressing that strength as effectively as I could, right? So that's something that I like to sort of think about in that regard. So I think the other question I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to make sure we got to, was a couple of different people were asking about, well, how do you stand out? How do you get chosen for things? And I know, Miriam, you talked when we were discussing this about dealing with ambiguity. And I think it's so important that and some of these other strengths that you think make people stand out. And so I'd love you to sort of share some of those thoughts and have Nancy and Julie jump in with their perspective on that as we sort of bring this to a close.
Yeah. So I think we've said it a lot in the last hour of showing up as your unique self authentically, all these things that, they feel really fluffy and really nice and they make us feel good. But there really is value to showing up as all of who you are and using that to dissect ambiguous situations. Because I think what happens in ambiguous situations is we look for a mold of somebody else who's done it and try to follow that. But the fact of the matter is, an ambiguous situation inherently doesn't have a mold to follow. And so you, being your unique self and your unique toolbox, have something that uniquely equips you to deal with this unique situation. You just have to try. And if you try and fail, at least you can walk through every single way in which, well, I tried this because of this and it didn't work. I tried this and because of this, but it kind of worked and it got us closer. you just have to kind of own the decision-making process. Ambiguity is really uncomfortable, and I've been dealing with it a lot in my work life, but I've been getting more and more used to it because I think what we forget, especially early in our careers, when so much has been set for a really long time, is that ambiguity is normal. And as soon as you own the ambiguity and own that you can uniquely handle ambiguity, it becomes a lot easier to stand out. Stop trying to be like Brad or Emily or Tara or whoever else it is that you're working with. Go be yourself. Go add value the way you can uniquely add it and try things. It's really scary. And we've talked about that a lot in the last hour as well, of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations outside your comfort zone. That's where growth lives. That's how you handle ambiguous situations. And I think that's how you ultimately stand out at work, because the true version of you is coming out.
And AI is not good at that.
AI is terrible at that. My CEO will sing that until the cows come home. AI is so bad at being unique. It wants to think it is. It's not.
But actually, I'm glad you mentioned the AI piece, because interestingly enough, right, this is a great example of it in my industry anyway. I'm sure Nancy could say this too. Everyone is like, okay, now what do we do about it? Right? It's like, this thing has arrived. What do we do? And I can promise you that nobody has the answer. So this is example number one of ambiguity. What do we do? How do we teach people to use it? How do we use it? Should we use it? Do we trust it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that increasingly, at least in like corporate organizations, we are being met with more and more ambiguous or never been trod before situations, right? So there is, to Miriam's point, nobody to look to be like, how's Brad going to help us, right? Instead, I think what people are doing from a hiring perspective, what I always do in my teams, what I'm seeing others around me do, we're increasingly looking for people who are agile enough to navigate, creative enough to navigate the current context, and can figure out how to, like, a roadmap to solve things. In other words put, I never wanted to be asked, how do I do it? It was like, why don't I propose? This is how I would approach it. What do you think would be a better starting point than going to my boss and being like, how would you like me to get from point A to point B? Point me the direction, right? And I think that that's emblematic of the era in which we're in. And also, to Miriam's point, will help you feel more like you're adding your own distinctive value and what makes you you in whatever ambiguous situation you're in.
Right. Nancy, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think ambiguity can feel, whether it's a situation or a role that you're in, the times where it's been, things are completely gray. There's no playbook. We can talk about COVID just changed the world. There was no way to manage it. There wasn't the right way to manage it. We were all running around trying to figure out, how to keep people safe, and still conduct business or, education, etc. I just found in moments of ambiguity, I try to find, to Julie's point, like people they just know more about certain topics than I do. I seek feedback. I soundboard. I try to get input, and then I go, okay, with all of this, this is where we're going, right? So I'm not able to just sort of go, okay, we're just going to go this way, and it's uninformed. I like to gather information, perspective, even if it's something you have to move quickly with. I like to have those agile experts or creative people bounce off. Okay, here we go. And I feel, that there's also a collective, there's support behind that idea, because there were people that, gave some input, gave some data, gave a perspective. And that's how I lead in ambiguity.
And those big hairy moments, most of the time, the folks who are asking about them, like, they've never been in them either. I think COVID is a brilliant example, Nancy, right? Like, and I was in a big organization at the time, and everyone was looking at it differently, right? At some point, you have to take an informed decision, but oftentimes the ambiguity is coming because the other folks are in the same boat as you. Yeah. So I wouldn't look at it as like a barrier so much as, okay, how can I be creative and nimble and suggest what I think is best, right? And
I think that's great. Yeah, no, I think that's it. And I'll say, one of my first bosses was my older brother, and I worked for him at a tech startup he had, summers in college. And the thing with that was that he just told me, go figure this out. It was things I knew nothing about. And he expected me to figure it out. And so I expected myself to figure it out. And so, I always went and I called people and got on the phone and did it. And then I would come back with the answers because that was what is expected of me. And I realized later in my career, not everyone gives you that, privilege. Now he was, he was my brother. So he thought, you can figure it out. I know you well, right? Not everyone has that confidence in you, but that was a skill that served me well. And I think it goes to what you were talking about, Julie. Come to the table with a solution, not, I don't know what to do. Like, actually come and say, well, you told me about this thing that needed to be done. I did this research and here's the story. And I think it's a fine line between, I talk to people who I work with, it's a fine line between spinning your wheels and getting an answer, right? So you have to find the right period there. But I think that makes you stand out if you can be someone who comes with a solution and doesn't get nervous about the ambiguity. So I think that's very helpful. I do think we have to wrap up for the evening. We could probably talk forever. You guys, I really thank you, Nancy, Julie, Miriam, for your time. I appreciate you being here, being your authentic self,
Margaret.
and being happy to do it. All your openness. So thank you for that. I have some takeaways. I'm gonna go away from this, as Julie said, being genuinely myself as much as I can. I'm going to think about, as Miriam said, what's my zone of genius that I have to contribute to every interaction I'm in. And Nancy, I'm going to do that with a wing person when I need it. And I think those were sort of the three. There were so many other great snippets of advice, but those were the three things I'm going to take away from this. I hope you all found something that you want to take away from this. This community of alumnae and alumni in general at Columbia is a lifelong resource. And so we're here to create a shared home base for you. So mentorship can take root here. We invite you to stay connected and keep the momentum going. Join CCW if you're not already a member. You're automatically a member just by being you. And bring a friend, create your own wing person. And I think the most important thing I'd like to say is, save the date on April 13th. If you can be in New York City, we're going to have an amazing event. Ursula Burns in conversation with Lisa Carnoy, our trustee emerita, and it's going to be an amazing event. We're going to have time for mentoring conversations before and after, and so we hope you could join that. And if not, we have some other incredible events this month that are virtual and are accessible for you wherever you happen to be. So thank you again to my good friends and esteemed panelists here. I've been so impressed, and I really think this has been a wonderful event. So thank you for sharing, all of you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you
Appreciate
all.
it.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thanks, team.